Okay, so we have finished our background, our middle ground, our foreground. We have done a few trees. We're not quite complete with all of them, but we've done a few. We've done 4 different types of rocks. We're going to go back to trees because there are some that we need to add in there, and they are shrubs. And usually shrubs, a wild shrub will grow just very much like this right here. So you want to kind of have your pencil sideways, and you're just going to take and make these real light marks in here. If you have a few dark ones, it's not going to be a big deal. Okay, now you're going to add, you may figure on some of your areas you're going to add your shadow in there. The base of your shadows, you can probably just rub that in, because generally shrubs have an accumulative amount of leaves in them. Now, once you get to a certain part, you can actually add some leaves in there, but you do not have to. It is not that important. Okay? You're doing basic work on here, and that's okay. Alright, now we're going to move to the river. We're going to make a line across. Now, rivers never stay straight. They always meander. Okay? So that means that your river is going to change, but it should never look like a road. So lay your pencil sideways and create your meandering. Now when you get to the other side, it's going to be in the same shape. Now when you're up here, this is where it's difficult, because you have to kind of make it to look where it's smaller. But when you get down here, it will be wider. So we're just going to kind of keep this close. And again, I'm laying my pencil sideways. And sometimes your meandering can change. Okay, so now I have my ground on each side. I may want to break this up as if it goes into another section. So let's see. My river breaks off and pulls off into another smaller section of water. So this is almost like an island. But I want to pull my pencil sideways because you're actually seeing the edge of the eroded part. When water hits the ground, it erodes some of the area. Now, when we're looking at it, this should be very thin, so you may want to thin out your eroded area, or your eroded area that you can't see, and make sure that they have just a line there. And this is why you do it very light, because once you get down to your basic drawing of it, you're going to add that erosion area with your pencil. Okay, so this part of my land is not going to be seen, so it comes off into here. My erosion is seen, it goes into here, but you can't quite see it very well here. This is where you almost have to change the angle of your pencil. So your erosion needs to be your very first thing you work on. And then you're going to have your lines as to what the edge of your ground will be, unless it slopes off. Let's say this edge might slope off into the river. So it's going to be added as if it's going to just dump off into the river right there, the edge of your land. So maybe this right here might be gravel. and it just kind of falls off. So that means that this erosion will go off into the water, and you can decide just how far it goes off into the water or not. And then you'll see the edge of the water along here. Okay, like I've told you many times, your rivers should never look exactly the same, and they may not look exactly the same as your teacher. What you do to them is totally up to you. I'm just giving you some ideas that you can add to it. So I don't see a whole lot of erosion here, but I do have an eroded area here. I don't have an erosion that you can see right here on my river, because this actually comes down. So when you're making an eroded area, as if there's erosion, you're actually going to see a very sharp edge here. So now I am gathering up my edges, and this may have a little bit more of an erosion because I'm able to see this side a lot more than the other. Doesn't have to, but it can, as if that is an area that is dropping down. Okay, so now I've got the edges of my land settled where I want them to be. Okay, always, always, always make sure that you sketch lightly onto your paper. If you draw, and you draw heavy, you need to be very careful, and this is why I recommend that you use sketching pencils. If you use a mechanical pencil, you're not going to get the value that you want. And again, this can be either mountain or sky. We're just going to give it a little bit of a shading so we can differentiate where our land is at. Okay, so now we're just basically going to work on the river. We are not going to work on this part of the land. So rivers have these unique little lines that you may see. Let's put maybe a couple of what we call cattails. Some of them see them like corn dogs on a stick. They have a little bit of a spike here, and then you lay your pencil sideways and you make your leaf. The reason we're doing this is so that it actually looks like we have something in the river, and you may want to make more than one cattail. And the reason I'm using the side of my pencil is I have actually more control of how thick I want things to be. And it turns out to be a little bit darker. Okay, now we may have water that runs through here, but generally you'll see kind of a cascading moment through here. So you're going to have these little lines. Okay, so just do very light lines. And what's neat about doing things in pencil is you can actually erase them if you make too many. Now we have a little bit of this splitting out in here. And you may want to make this where this is almost a waterfall right here. So you'll see this. And we're going to go ahead and cover that with color. But we have a little bit of a waterfall, so we're going to take our eraser and we're going to erase the area where it might actually be going downhill and creating a little bit of a cascading area where it's splashing. When it splashes, it has a little bit of a white to it. So we're going to make a few little lines. Whatever you do, you don't want to draw the cascading part. You just want to leave a hint that it's there. And maybe there's another one here. it looks like it's actually going down. And the best way to make it look like it is to pull your lines to create that illusion. Okay, so now in a river there's generally little bits of rocks in there. So we don't want to have the lines in there. And we're going to have our river move around our rock. So this line will not exist because our rock's in the way. It's going to go around it. So that means there may be a little bit of a dark area right here that's in the water. Okay, now give this a little bit of color with your finger. Not a whole lot, because it kind of blends in your lines. If you've done your lines correctly, then you should barely see hints of lines. I'm going to zoom this in so you can take a better look at it, so I can get it in the right direction. Can you see those lines? There we go. You should barely be able to see these lines in here around that rock because you've rubbed them in. Your cattail has very little lines that run through it. Okay, now let's focus on this rock. Generally a rock is going to be darker. So we're going to color all that in. The space is almost too small for my fingers, so I'm going to use a smudging stump. And I'm definitely going to rub this in real hard. Okay, now I'm going to lighten up some areas, and I'm just going to kind of tease where I want the light to hit. It does not have to look absolutely perfect. And then underneath those lights that I have in there, I'm going to create a little bit of a shadow in there, because they may stick out some. Also helps make your rock look a little more believable. Okay. If you choose to have a bridge, you have to decide exactly how you want it. We will work on bridges later, so at this point in time, I would say let's not make that a big deal. Okay, so number one, you want to have your eroded area. Your erosion, number two, you want to have items in the river. 3, water lines, H2O lines. Okay, now those are the basics. And number 4, you want to have slopes to where it looks like it actually, so let's say that this, yeah, that's a good idea. Let's get rid of this line right here. Let's make it look as if it eroded this little bridge across here. So that means that the water can come up in here, and you can actually give it a little bit of a shade as if the water has pushed its way up in here and it's real soft, but it has allowed that to erode into that area. So when water touches ground, it actually makes the ground look rather dark. So if you're shading this area for your ground, then your wet area will be a whole lot darker because it's wet soil. So that means that this right here could actually be wet as well. picking up some of the water. It won't be as deep. So this could actually be something that might be eroding later on. Okay, so your water is coming into this zone. Now, let's give it a little bit more of a shade. Now, a good thing about water is it also has some light points to it, like I showed you with the cascading water that falls down. In some areas of your water, we also have light. If you have ever seen a rock drop into a river, you see the lines, but have you ever paid attention to the light that goes with it? Take your knead eraser and you're going to kind of follow your river a little bit and stay along the same lines that you have. If you make a mistake, just rub your finger over it and go back over it again with your eraser. So I'm following my lines, not my eroded areas, sorry about that. And I'm creating more detail to my water. Alright, time's up. So now, because this is not visible very well, I'm going to go ahead and add a very light line to this so that it looks like it's actually creating a variation in there. And this is where learning about science helps an artist, so that we can learn how to create these different variations in art in a river.